If you want to change your life, don't start by changing the world. Start by controlling three things: your mind, your mouth, and your money. And your money. These three decide your direction, your reputation, and your future. When they are out of control, life feels chaotic. When they are disciplined, life becomes powerful. First, control your mind. Your mind is either your greatest weapon or your biggest enemy. Every success, every failure, every fear, and every breakthrough begins as a thought. If you allow negative thoughts, self-doubt, jealousy, or fear to live rent-free in your head, they will quietly destroy your confidence and focus. A controlled mind doesn't react to everything. It chooses what deserves attention. Strong people don't have fewer problems. They have stronger minds that refuse to quit. Control your mouth. Words are not harmless. What you say can build respect or burn bridges in seconds. Many people ruin opportunities not because they lack talent, but because they speak without thinking. Complaining, gossiping, oversharing, or speaking in anger always costs more than silence. A disciplined mouth knows when to speak, what to speak, and when silence is the smarter option. Sometimes saying less is the loudest sign of maturity. Third, control your money. Money is a tool, not a master. Tool, not a master. If you don't control your money, it will control you. Most financial stress doesn't come from lack of income, but from lack of discipline. Ignoring savings and chasing quick pleasure leads to long-term pain. Controlled money habits create freedom. Freedom from debt, freedom from stress, and freedom to choose your future. Most people underestimate how much power their daily thoughts hold over their entire life. What you consistently allow into your mind slowly becomes the blueprint for your actions, decisions, habits, and ultimately your destiny. The mind is like a control room. Whatever images, ideas, fears, and beliefs you keep replaying there will shape how you see yourself and the world. If your mind is constantly focused on limitations, comparisons, past failures, or imagined fears, your life will naturally shrink to match those thoughts. On the other hand, when your mind is trained to focus on growth, solutions, self-respect, and long-term vision, your actions begin to align with progress, even when circumstances are difficult. Your mind does not distinguish between useful and useless thoughts. It only responds to repetition and emotional intensity. The thoughts you think every day quietly program your behavior. A person who repeatedly tells themselves, I can't, I'm not good enough, or nothing ever works for me will unconsciously act in ways that confirm those beliefs. They hesitate, procrastinate, avoid risks, and settle for less, not because they lack ability, but because their mind has already decided the outcome. In contrast, someone who consistently feeds their mind with discipline, self-belief, and focus begins to move differently. They take responsibility, learn from mistakes, and keep going even when results are slow. What you focus on also determines your emotional state. A mind focused on problems creates stress, anxiety, and frustration. A mind focused on solutions creates calm, confidence, and clarity. This does not mean ignoring reality or pretending everything is perfect. It means choosing where your attention goes. You cannot control every situation, but you can control how much mental space it occupies. When you let every negative comment, setback, or inconvenience dominate your thoughts, you give away your power. The controlled mind acknowledges challenges without becoming consumed by them. Daily focus is especially important because small thoughts repeated over time create massive outcomes. One negative thought may seem harmless, but thousands of them over months and years can completely reshape your self-image. Likewise, one positive or disciplined thought will not change your life overnight, but consistent mental discipline builds inner strength. The people who appear mentally strong are not born that way. They have trained their minds to reject useless thoughts and reinforce empowering ones. They understand that not every thought deserves attention, and not every emotion deserves a reaction. Your environment constantly competes for control of your mind. Social media, news, conversations, and other people's opinions try to dictate what you should fear, desire, or feel insecure about. If you don't consciously choose your mental diet, Your mind will be filled by default with distraction, negativity, and comparison. That is why controlling your focus is an act of self-respect. It means being intentional about what you read, watch, listen to, and think about. It means protecting your mind the same way you would protect your body from harmful substances. Another critical aspect of mental control is awareness. Many people live on autopilot, unaware of the thoughts running through their heads. They react emotionally without questioning why they feel the way they do. When you become aware of your thoughts, you gain the power to challenge them. You begin to ask, is this thought helping me or holding me back? Is it based on facts or fear? Does it move me closer to the person I want to become? This awareness creates space between stimulus and response, and in that space lies freedom. Your focus also determines your consistency. Motivation comes and goes, but a trained mind does not rely on motivation alone. When your focus is clear, you act even when you don't feel like it. You show up, do the work, and stay disciplined because your mind understands the long-term reward. People who lack focus often jump from one idea to another, one goal to the next, never giving themselves enough time to see results. A controlled mind stays committed even when progress feels slow and invisible. Over time, controlling your mental focus builds self-trust. Every time you redirect your thoughts away from doubt and toward purpose, you reinforce the belief that you are in charge. This creates confidence that does not depend on validation from others. You stop seeking approval because your mind is no longer easily influenced by external noise. You become calmer, more decisive, and more resilient under pressure. Ultimately, the direction of your life is determined not by dramatic moments, but by ordinary thoughts repeated daily. Your focus decides whether you grow or stagnate, whether you act or hesitate, whether you lead or follow. When you take control of what your mind focuses on, you take control of your actions. And when your actions change consistently, your entire life begins to shift quietly, steadily, and powerfully. Emotional control is often misunderstood as suppressing feelings or pretending not to care, but in reality, it begins with mental discipline, not emotional denial. Emotions are natural responses to thoughts, interpretations, and beliefs. When the mind is undisciplined, emotions take over and dictate behavior. When the mind is trained, emotions are acknowledged but not allowed to run the show. This distinction is what separates reactive individuals from composed, resilient ones. Every emotional reaction starts as a thought. Anger begins with interpretation. Fear begins with assumption. Anxiety begins with anticipation. If the mind instantly accepts every thought as truth, emotions will escalate without restraint. Mental discipline creates a pause between thought and reaction. In that pause, you gain the power to choose your response rather than being controlled by impulse. This is why two people can face the same situation and react completely differently. One is governed by emotion, the other by disciplined thinking. External comfort, money, praise, validation, or avoidance can temporarily mask emotional discomfort, but it does not create emotional control. Many people rely on distractions to escape uncomfortable feelings, scrolling endlessly, overeating, overspending, or seeking approval. These habits provide short-term relief, but weaken emotional strength over time. True emotional control comes from the ability to sit with discomfort without being overwhelmed by it. A disciplined mind understands that discomfort is temporary and does not require immediate reaction. Mental discipline also involves reframing situations. Instead of asking, oh, why is this happening to me? A trained mind asks, oh, what can I learn from this? Or, oh, how can I respond in a way that benefits me long term? This shift does not remove the emotion, but it reduces its intensity and prevents destructive behavior. When emotions are viewed as information rather than commands, they lose their power to control actions. Another critical element of emotional control is recognizing emotional triggers. The informational triggers are often rooted in past experiences, insecurities, or unresolved beliefs. Without awareness, the same triggers will repeatedly hijack behavior. Mental discipline allows you to observe these patterns without self-judgment. You begin to notice when certain words, situations, or people consistently provoke strong reactions. Awareness transforms triggers from weaknesses into opportunities for growth. A disciplined mind also resisted the urge for instant gratification. Many emotional outbursts happen because people want immediate relief from discomfort. They speak harshly, quit prematurely, or make impulsive decisions to escape unpleasant feelings. Mental discipline teaches patience. Patience. It reinforces the understanding that not every emotion requires expression and not every urge requires action. This restraint is not weakness. It is strength practiced quietly. Consistency in emotional control is built through daily mental habits. Simple practices like pausing before responding, questioning emotional assumptions, and practicing self-reflection strengthen mental discipline over time. Just as physical strength develops through repeated training, emotional control develops through repeated conscious effort. There are no shortcuts. Each moment of restraint strengthens the mind's ability to remain steady under pressure. Mental discipline also fosters emotional independence. When your emotions depend on external circumstances or other people's behavior, your peace becomes fragile. A disciplined mind anchors emotional stability internally. This does not mean indifference. It means self-regulation. You stop allowing others' moods, opinions, or actions to dictate your emotional state. This independence creates confidence and emotional maturity. Another overlooked aspect is self-talk. The way you speak to yourself during emotional moments determines whether emotions escalate or settle. Harsh self-criticism intensifies negative emotions, while calm, rational self-talk creates balance. A disciplined mind replaces emotional exaggeration with perspective. Instead of everything is ruined, it shifts to this is difficult but manageable. This internal dialogue shapes emotional resilience. Emotional control does not eliminate emotions, it refines them. You still feel anger, sadness, excitement, and disappointment, but they no longer dominate your behavior. The mind becomes the leader, and emotions become followers. Over time, this leadership creates stability, clarity, and inner strength. Emotional storms may still arise, but a disciplined mind ensures they pass without causing unnecessary damage. Ultimately, emotional control is a skill developed through mental training, not external comfort or avoidance. It is the result of choosing long-term growth over short-term relief, awareness over impulse, and discipline over reaction. When the mind is trained, emotions become manageable, behavior becomes intentional, and life becomes less chaotic and more grounded in self-mastery. Thoughts are not harmless events that pass through the mind and disappear without consequence. Answer. Every thought leaves a subtle imprint, and when the same thought is repeated again and again, it begins to settle into the subconscious. At first, it feels temporary, like a passing idea, but repetition gives it weight. Over time, the mind stops questioning that thought and starts accepting it as truth. This is how beliefs are formed, not through one dramatic moment, but through quiet mental repetition. What you repeatedly tell yourself becomes what you eventually believe about yourself, others, and life. Beliefs feel solid and unquestionable for a long time, more than thoughts practiced for a long time. A person who repeatedly thinks they are unlucky will eventually believe life is unfair. A person who constantly thinks they are capable and adaptable will come to believe they can handle whatever comes their way. Once a belief is formed, it acts like a filter. It decides how you interpret experiences, how you react to challenges, and what opportunities you even notice. Two people can experience the same failure. One sees proof they should quit, the other sees feedback to improve. The difference is not intelligence or talent, it is belief. Beliefs quietly guide actions. You do not wake up each day and consciously decide every behavior. Most actions happen automatically, driven by what you believe to be true. If you believe you are not good enough, you will hesitate, avoid responsibility, and shrink your ambitions without realizing why. Why? If you believe effort leads to growth, you will persist even when results are slow. Actions feel like personal choices, but they are often predictable outcomes of deeply held beliefs. Change the belief and behavior changes naturally. Ignore the belief, and no amount of motivation will last. This is why willpower alone often fails. People try to change actions without addressing the beliefs underneath them. They force themselves to act differently, but their internal narrative remains unchanged. Eventually, the old belief pulls them back into old habits. Sustainable change requires starting at the thought level. When thoughts are intentionally repeated with awareness, they slowly reshape belief systems. This process is subtle and gradual, but it is powerful. The mind learns through consistency, not intensity. Not intensity. The repetition of thoughts happens both consciously and unconsciously. Self talk, inner dialogue, and emotional reactions all reinforce certain ideas. When you repeatedly replay mistakes in your mind, you strengthen the belief that failure defines you. When you constantly compare yourself to others, you reinforce the belief that you are behind. These thoughts may not feel like decisions, but they are choices reinforced through attention. Whatever you give mental energy to grow stronger, whether it serves you or not. External influences also play a major role in shaping repeated thoughts. The people you spend time with, the content you consume, and the environments you place yourself in all feed your mind ideas. Oh, Jude. If your surroundings constantly emphasize fear, lack, or negativity, those themes become familiar and eventually believable. Familiarity is often mistaken for truth. A disciplined mind questions repeated messages instead of absorbing them automatically. Without this awareness, beliefs are inherited rather than chosen. Once beliefs are established, they influence emotions as well. Emotions do not arise randomly, they are reactions to beliefs about situations. If you believe rejection means personal failure, rejection will feel devastating. If you believe rejection is part of growth, it will still hurt, but it will not paralyze you. Emotions then reinforce belief further, creating a cycle that becomes harder to break over time. Thoughts shape beliefs, beliefs shape emotions, and emotions push actions that confirm the original belief. Breaking this cycle requires conscious interruption, caution, interruption. It starts by noticing repeated thoughts without immediately accepting them. Awareness alone weakens their grip. When a thought is questioned, it loses authority. Asking simple questions like, is this always true? Or where did this belief come from? Creates distance between you and the narrative in your head. That distance is where change begins. New thoughts must be repeated intentionally to compete with old ones. This repetition may feel unnatural at first because the mind resists change, preferring what is familiar. Over time, repeated intentional thoughts form new beliefs. These beliefs then begin to guide behavior effortlessly. Discipline becomes easier, confidence becomes steadier, and decisions become clearer. You stop forcing yourself to act differently because your internal alignment has shifted. The external change reflects the internal one. This is why mental work often feels invisible but produces visible results later. Every habit, good or bad, is rooted in belief. A person who believes they deserve stability will manage their time and resources carefully. A person who believes chaos is normal will unconsciously create it. Actions are the final expression of an internal belief system that has been shaped by years of repeated thought. This means responsibility lies not just in what you do, but in what you repeatedly think. Understanding this process gives you leverage over your life. You may not control every circumstance, but you do influence the thoughts you rehearse daily. Those thoughts become beliefs, and those beliefs quietly decide how you live. Whether your actions move you forward or keep you stuck is rarely an accident. It is the predictable outcome of the thoughts you have allowed to repeat without challenge. Words are often treated casually, as if they disappear the moment they are spoken. But in reality, they leave permanent marks on relationships, reputations, and self-image. Once a word leaves your mouth, it no longer belongs to you. It enters the mind of the listener, where it is interpreted through their emotions, experiences, and insecurities. You may forget what you said within minutes, but the person who heard it may carry its impact for years. This is why careless speech is one of the most underestimated forms of self-sabotage. Every word carries emotional weight. Even statements meant as jokes can wound if they touch a sensitive place in someone else. The speaker may intend no harm, but intention does not erase impact. 8. Impact. A single harsh comment can undo years of trust, while one moment of verbal disrespect can permanently alter how someone sees you. Words shape perception, and perception shapes reality. Once people form an image of you based on what you say, changing that image becomes extremely difficult. Spoken words also reveal more than people realize. They expose mindset, maturity, discipline, and emotional control. Someone who constantly complains reveals a scarcity mindset. Someone who gossips reveals insecurity and lack of boundaries. Someone who speaks in anger reveals a lack of self-mastery. Even when words are factually correct, the tone and timing can still cause damage. How you speak often matters more than what you say. One of the most dangerous moments for speech is emotional intensity. Anger, jealousy, excitement, or frustration lower mental filters and push words out without consideration of consequence. In these moments, people say things they don't fully mean. But once spoken, those words become real to the listener. Apologies may follow, but the damage is rarely fully erased. Trust once shaken by words does not easily return to its original state. Words not only affect others, they also affect the speaker. Repeated negative speech reinforces negative thinking. When someone constantly verbalizes doubt, blame, or hopelessness, they strengthen those mental patterns within themselves. Speaking negatively trains the mind to see problems instead of possibilities. Over time, the speaker begins to believe their own words, turning temporary frustration into permanent limitation. There is also a social cost to uncontrolled speech. Opportunities are often lost, not because of lack of skill, but because of something said at the wrong time. A careless remark at a meeting, an emotional response during conflict, or unnecessary oversharing can quietly close doors. People remember how you made them feel more than what you achieved. A reputation built on impulsive speech is difficult to repair. Another overlooked consequence is how the words spread. Once spoken, they can be repeated, exaggerated, or misunderstood. A private comment can quickly become public, and a moment of honesty can turn into long-term exposure. You may clarify later, but the original words often travel faster and farther than the explanation. This is why restraint is a form of intelligence. Violence, when used wisely, prevents damage before it begins. Controlling speech does not mean suppressing truth. It means expressing it with awareness. What timing, tone, and purpose matter. Not every thought deserves to be spoken, and not every truth needs immediate expression. Wisdom lies in knowing when words will help and when they will harm. Speaking without this awareness is like releasing an arrow. Without aiming, it may hit something you never intended. Words also play a critical role in conflict. Escalation usually begins with language. One disrespectful sentence invites another, and soon the original issue is forgotten while egos collide. A single calm sentence spoken with control can de-escalate tension and preserve dignity. See, Timothy separates emotionally mature individuals from reactive ones anew. Control over speech is control over outcomes. Over time, disciplined speech builds credibility. People learn that when you speak, it has value. They listen more closely because your words are not wasted on complaints, exaggeration, or emotional outbursts. This quiet authority cannot be faked. It is earned through consistent restraint. Those who speak less but with intention often carry more influence than those who speak constantly. Once words are spoken, they cannot be retrieved, edited, or erased. They become part of the past, shaping memories and decisions beyond your control. Understanding this creates caution, not fear. It encourages mindfulness. When speech is guided by awareness instead of impulse, it becomes a tool for respect, clarity, and strength rather than regret. Silence is often misunderstood as weakness, avoidance, or lack of confidence. But in reality, it is one of the strongest forms of self-control. Unnecessary explanations usually come from a desire to be understood, validated, or accepted. Yet the more someone explains without being asked, the more power they give away. Silence, when chosen intentionally, protects dignity, preserves energy, and prevents situations from becoming more complicated than they need to be. Most people feel an internal pressure to explain themselves, especially when they feel misunderstood, judged, or questioned. This pressure is rooted in insecurity, and fear of misinterpretation. The mind convinces itself that if it just says a little more, clarity will be achieved. However, excessive explaining often has the opposite effect. It invites scrutiny, creates room for misinterpretation, and exposes thoughts that were better left unspoken. Silence avoids this trap entirely. Unnecessary explanations often weaken authority. When someone over explains, they signal doubt in their own position, as if they need permission or approval. Confident individuals understand that their actions, consistency, and boundaries speak louder than words. I think they do not rush to justify themselves to everyone because they recognize that not all opinions deserve a response. Silence communicates self-assurance without effort. Another important aspect of silence is that it prevents emotional leakage. In moments of tension or accusation, explaining while emotional often leads to revealing too much, saying things out of frustration, or contradicting oneself. Emotions cloud judgment, and words spoken under emotional pressure tend to create long-term consequences. Silence allows emotions to settle and clarity to return. It creates space between stimulus and response, which is where control exists. Silence also protects personal boundaries. Not everyone needs access to your reasons, intentions, or plans. Oversharing invites unnecessary opinions, advice, and criticism. When you explain too much, people feel entitled to judge, interfere, or influence your decisions. Silence draws a clear line. It communicates that your choices do not require external validation. This boundary preserves mental peace and personal autonomy. There is also a strategic value to silence. When you remain silent, you gather information. People reveal their intentions, assumptions, and character when they speak into silence. Over-explaining fills the space and gives others less opportunity to expose their true motives. Silence shifts control of the conversation. It forces others to reflect, reconsider, or clarify their position rather than reacting to your words. Unnecessary explanations can also trap you into defending yourself against assumptions that are not even true. By explaining, you unintentionally validate the accusation. Silence refuses to engage with false narratives. It communicates that not every misunderstanding deserves correction, especially when the truth will eventually reveal itself through actions. Time often proves what words cannot. Silence strengthens self-respect. When you stop explaining yourself to people who have already decided to misunderstand you, you reclaim emotional energy. Constantly justifying yourself is exhausting and rarely satisfying. Silence, on the other hand, is calm. It allows you to remain centered rather than reactive. It shifts focus from convincing others to staying aligned with your own values. In relationships, silence can prevent unnecessary conflict. Many arguments escalate because of excessive explanation. One sentence turns into a defense. The defense turns into justification, and justification turns into blame. Silence breaks this chain. It does not mean ignoring issues. It means choosing the right moment and mindset to address them. Silence delays reaction until response becomes productive. Silence also encourages accountability in others. When you stop explaining, people must take responsibility for their interpretations and reactions. They can no longer rely on your words to reassure, comfort, or excuse behavior. This often leads to more honest interactions. Those who respect you will seek understanding. Those who do not reveal themselves through their impatience with your silence. There is a difference between silence born of fear and silence born of control. Fearful silence hides truth to avoid consequences. Controlled silence chooses restraint because not every truth needs to be spoken immediately or repeatedly. This kind of silence is intentional and grounded. It reflects emotional maturity rather than avoidance. Over time, silence builds presence. People begin to notice when you speak less, but with purpose. Your words gain weight because they are not diluted by constant explanation. When you do choose to speak, it is deliberate, clear, and impactful. This presence cannot be forced. It emerges naturally from restraint. Unnecessary explanations often come from the illusion that being understood by everyone is possible. Silence accepts that it is not. Some people will misunderstand, no matter how clearly you explain. Heiserton. Silence frees you from that burden. It allows you to move forward without dragging every opinion along with you. Silence is not the absence of communication. It is a form of communication. It says, I am secure, I trust my actions, and I do not need to prove myself. In a world full of noise, restraint stands out. The silence, when chosen consciously, becomes a powerful statement of self-control and inner strength. Speaking less and listening more is not merely a social skill. It is a discipline that sharpens wisdom and quietly builds respect over time. In a world where most people are eager to be heard, the individual who listens carefully stands apart. Listening requires patience, restraint, and humility, qualities that deepen understanding and maturity. The maturity. When you speak less, you create space to observe, absorb, and interpret what is truly happening rather than reacting to surface level noise. Most people speak to respond, not to understand. They interrupt, prepare their reply while the other person is still talking, or steer conversations back to themselves. This habit limits growth because wisdom comes from exposure to perspectives beyond your own. Listening allows you to gather information, notice patterns, and understand motivations that words alone cannot reveal. Tone, pauses, body language, and emotional cues often communicate more truth than spoken sentences, but they can only be noticed when you are quiet enough to pay attention. Speaking less also reduces errors. Many mistakes are made through unnecessary words, misstatements, exaggerations, emotional reactions, or poorly timed opinions. When you talk less, you give yourself time to think. Thoughtful silence prevents impulsive speech and protects you from revealing ignorance, insecurity, or bias. It allows your responses to be measured rather than reactive. Over time, this restraint builds a reputation for clarity and intelligence. Listening more exposes you to knowledge you do not yet possess. Every person knows something you don't. Even those with less experience can offer insights through their mistakes, attitudes, or reactions. When you listen attentively, you learn without effort. You gain access to real-world lessons that cannot be found in books or theories. This accumulation of understanding gradually becomes wisdom, not loud or flashy, but deep and grounded. Respect is also earned through listening. People feel valued when they are heard. When someone realizes you are genuinely paying attention, they trust you more. They open up, share honestly, and feel comfortable around you. This trust creates influence. You do not need to assert authority when others willingly give you respect. Listening communicates that you believe others matter, and that belief is felt immediately. Speaking less prevents dominance and ego-driven interaction. Constant talking often comes from the need to prove intelligence, control conversations, or seek validation. Listening shifts the focus away from ego and toward understanding. This humility is noticed. People associate quiet attentiveness with confidence because it signals that you do not need constant affirmation. Your value is not dependent on being the loudest voice in the room. In professional environments, listening more often leads to better decisions. Meetings are filled with opinions, but the person who listens carefully connects the dots others miss. They identify contradictions, underlying concerns, and unspoken resistance. When they eventually speak, their input carries weight because it reflects understanding rather than impulse. Speaking less but more accurately increases credibility and leadership presence. Listening also strengthens emotional intelligence. You begin to recognize the emotions behind words. Frustration masked as criticism, fear hidden behind anger, or insecurity disguised as confidence. This awareness allows you to respond appropriately instead of defensively. Emotional intelligence is built through observation, not expression. The quieter you are, the more clearly you see. Another benefit of speaking less is the ability to control conversations. Silence often encourages others to fill the gap, revealing more than they intended. People clarify their positions, expose inconsistencies, or share additional information when met with attentive silence. This is not manipulation, it is awareness. Silence shifts power subtly without confrontation. Speaking less also preserves energy. Constant talking, explaining, and defending is mentally exhausting. Listening requires focus but less emotional output. This balance helps maintain calm and composure, especially in tense situations. Calmness itself commands respect. Commands respect. People trust those who remain composed under pressure more than those who speak excessively to manage anxiety. Over time, listening shapes judgment. You stop reacting to isolated comments and start understanding broader context. You recognize that situations are rarely as simple as they appear. This depth of perception influences how you act, decide, and speak. When you do speak, your words are informed, relevant, and impactful because they are grounded in understanding rather than assumption. Speaking less does not mean having nothing to say. It means choosing words carefully. It means understanding that value lies not in quantity but in relevance. A few thoughtful words spoken at the right time carry more influence than endless commentary. People remember what you say because it stands out against your usual restraint. Listening more also teaches patience. Patience. So you learn to sit with discomfort, disagreement, or silence without rushing to fill. In doing so, you gain insight into people's true thoughts rather than their rehearsed responses. Ultimately, wisdom grows in silence and observation. Respect grows when others feel heard and understood. Speaking less and listening more aligns both. It transforms communication from a performance into a connection, from noise into meaning. Through this discipline, understanding deepens, relationships strengthen, and influence grows without effort or force. Money is often misunderstood as a measure of success, but in reality, it is a reflection of discipline. Income alone does not determine financial stability. Behavior does. Two people can earn the same amount and live completely different financial lives. One calm and secure, the other stressed and struggling. The difference is not luck or opportunity, but how consistently they manage what they have. Money reveals habits, priorities, patience, and self-control more clearly than almost anything else. Discipline with money starts with awareness. Many people avoid looking closely at their finances because it makes them uncomfortable. They spend without tracking, borrow without planning, and hope things will somehow work out. This lack of awareness is not accidental, it is avoidance. Discipline requires facing reality honestly, even when the numbers are not ideal. Looking at income, expenses, debts, and savings without denial is the first act of financial self-respect. Money behavior is deeply emotional. Spending is often driven by feelings rather than needs, stress, boredom, insecurity, or the desire for validation. When someone uses money to manage emotions, discipline weakens. Buying things to feel better, to impress others, or to escape discomfort creates short-term relief, but long-term instability. A disciplined approach recognizes emotional triggers and refuses to let feelings dictate financial decisions. Impulse is one of the biggest enemies of financial discipline. Modern life constantly encourages instant gratification. By now, pay later, reward yourself immediately. Discipline resists this pressure. It understands the cost beyond the price tag, future stress, reduced options, and lost freedom. Saying no in the moment is difficult, but saying no repeatedly builds strength. Each disciplined choice reinforces control, making the next one easier. Money also reflects priorities. People often claim they value security, growth, or freedom, yet their spending tells a different story. Where money goes reveals what truly matters. Discipline aligns spending with long-term values rather than short-term desires. It means funding stability before luxury, progress before pleasure. This alignment creates consistency between what someone says they want and how they live. Lack of discipline with money often shows up as justification. People explain poor financial choices with excuses. I deserve it. Everyone does this, or I'll fix it later. These narratives protect comfort but delay responsibility. Discipline does not rely on excuses. It accepts trade-offs and understands that every financial decision closes one door and opens another, and chooses intentionally rather than reactively. Saving is one of the clearest signs of financial discipline. It requires delaying gratification, trusting the future, and valuing stability over appearance. Saving is not about fear. It is about preparation. A disciplined saver does not assume life will always go as planned. They respect uncertainty and prepare for it quietly. This preparation reduces anxiety and increases confidence, even when income is modest. But when unmanaged, often reflects a lack of discipline rather than lack of resources. Borrowing to grow or invest can be strategic, but borrowing to sustain a lifestyle beyond one's means creates dependence. Discipline distinguishes between productive and destructive debt. It asks whether a financial choice increases future capacity or simply postpones discomfort. Small purchases seem harmless. Occasional indulgences feel deserved. And borrowing appears convenient, but uncontrolled spending does not stay small. It accumulates quietly, turning convenience into obligation and comfort into pressure. This trade-off is rarely conscious, but it shapes the future. Uncontrolled spending borrows not just money, but peace from tomorrow. Dependence deepens when emergencies arise. Without savings, unexpected expenses become crises. Borrowing becomes the default response. This independence strengthens dignity. You are not forced to compromise values or decisions due to financial pressure. Self-respect grows when choices are made freely rather than under constraint. Investing further separates emotional decision-making from financial behavior. Control over the mouth strengthens this confidence further. When you speak with intention and restraint, you reduce regret and self-criticism. You are no longer replaying conversations in your head, wishing you had said less or spoken differently. This clarity creates self-respect. You may still work hard, face pressure, and carry responsibility, but you are not constantly fighting yourself. This peace is the true foundation of success because it allows you to sustain effort without burning out. When these three areas are mastered together, life becomes intentional.